my Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask you for pardon of my sins and grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Well, there's one thing that Jesus clearly wants to teach his apostles, and that is the lesson of service. And in today's gospel, we see Jesus calling the 12 apostles around him and giving them this really clear message. It begins like this. Jesus called the 12 to him and said to them, "You know that among the pagans, their so-called rulers lord it over them, and their great men make their authority felt. This is not to happen among you." It's a very clear statement. And Jesus is talking about something that is present in every last one of us. And St. Augustine, the very famous St. Augustine, he gives a little Latin term for this kind of thing that we're all suffering from, and he calls it libido dominandi. That's the desire to dominate over others, the lust for government, the will to power. We could say, even in very subtle ways, we're doing that the whole time, looking somehow for the place of honor and that other people would have to serve me. Again, in very subtle ways. But Jesus shows us in today's gospel that for us Christians, everything has to be kind of a little bit upside down. The person who is normally considered the last or the least is a servant. And Jesus says, well, they're the greatest. So he says in the gospel, anyone who wants to become great among you must be your servant. And anyone who wants to be first among you must be slave to all. That's a strong word, slave, not just servant, a slave to everybody. And really, I suppose if we really were to do this life, if all of us were to do this life on earth would be already almost heaven. There's a story told by Pope John Paul I, who tells us about a scene that involves a Korean general who died and he was judged and he was assigned to go to heaven. But when he turned up in front of St. Peter, he had this funny wish, and he said that before he went to heaven, he'd like to take a quick peep, just for a couple of minutes, into hell, just to have an idea about that sad place. And so St. Peter said, sure enough. And he got a special peep in at the gate of hell. And there he saw an immense room with many long tables. On one of these tables, there were so many bowls of cooked rice, properly spiced, aromatic, inviting. And the diners were all seated there, filled with hunger, two at each bowl, one facing the other over the table. But then to carry the rice to their mouths, they had, in good Oriental fashion, they had a pair of chopsticks, but so long that no matter how great their efforts, not a grain of rice could reach the mouth. This was their punishment. This was hell. And the general said, I've seen enough. And he went back and he went into the gates of paradise. And he went in and it was the exact same. The same kind of room, the same kind of tables, the same kind of rice and long chopsticks. But here the people were happy, smiling and eating. Why? Because each, having picked up the food with the chopsticks, raised it to the mouth of the companion facing him. And they all managed splendidly. So it's a great little story, the exact same situation, exact same food, exact same chopsticks, except the people in hell were not going to use their chopsticks to serve anybody else. Those in heaven used their chopsticks to serve the others. And they kind of saw themselves as servants. And they're quite happy. I'm going to serve the person in front of me. And lucky for me, they will serve me. So we as disciples of Jesus, we have to run away from the libido dominandi, the desire to dominate over others. And Jesus himself gives us a perfect model of that kind of life. For example, we know very famously how Jesus runs away when they want to make him king. Now, if you or I were being made king in some way or other, top of the class, star of the university, star in my firm, receiving all kinds of plaudits and people kind of serving me, I don't know how fast we would run away. We would be saying, finally my ship has come in. Not so with Jesus. You, Jesus, you run away when they tried to make you king. You had no libido domini. You had no desire to dominate over other people. To serve them? Yes. To dominate over them? No. And that's why even when we talk about each Christian being in some way a reflection of Jesus as a priest, a prophet, and a king, when we talk about being a reflection of Jesus as a king, we always talk in terms of service. And in the gospel, our Lord goes on, Jesus, you say these words, for the Son of Man himself did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So Jesus is also saying something quite important here, that he didn't come to just serve occasionally, like we might, like a good Boy Scout doing a good deed for the day. Jesus approaches everything, his whole life, as serving. It's not something, again, little things he does, and that's me done for the day. No, his whole life, I am a servant. Everything I do is to serve, even to give my life, even to give my whole life away, to die as you do, Lord, for us on the cross, and that is service. Of course, in this, your beloved mother gave us all a wonderful example also. And Jesus lived with this wonderful example of his own mother, who, when the angel Gabriel appears to her in the Annunciation and begins the message, Hail Mary, full of grace, Our Lady's reply to the message is, Behold the handmaid of the Lord. Now, handmaid is a translation of ancilla. We don't use the word handmaid very often, but a handmaid is a servant girl. She's a maid, a handmaid. She's a handy girl who's there to serve. And that's the way Our Lady identifies herself, as a small serving girl. I like to imagine that when Gabriel, the Archangel Gabriel, heard this, he almost had to hold back a tear. When he heard that line from Our Lady, it took his breath away. Not that angels have breath, but we can imagine. It took his breath away that she would say, Behold the handmaiden of the Lord, Ecce ancilla Domini. But as he knew, this little girl who identifies as a small serving girl is at the same time certainly the greatest, the empress, the queen of angels. So Angel Gabriel will be saying, she's my queen. She's the queen of heaven, queen of all creation, the greatest creature that God has ever created. But she just wants to be a small serving girl, which is really wonderful. So we can learn that lesson from her, like we look at you, Lord, and we learn that same lesson, the two of you teaching us the exact same lesson. Serve, don't be afraid, not just to now and again, like Boy Scouts or Girl Guides, but your whole life, to see it as a service. I give you thanks, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask you for help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.